Welcome, students of literature, to this explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into a truly grim, dark fable of existential decay. And to really do this justice, I'm stepping into the shadows. I'll be taking on the persona of your guide through this text, the Moon Spirit. Just imagine me guiding you through the dark, rain-slicked streets of a very, very different kind of world. So let's just jump right into it. The text is The Alchemical Agitation of Fire and Frost.
I am the Moon Spirit, the Silver Weaver, watching as the rain-slicked alleys of your world liquefy into the raw potential of the void. In this story, we're entering what's known as the Great Evening. And as this great evening deepens, it's like the very atmosphere around us is agitated into this state of high-energy flux. Things that were once totally static and unmoving, well, suddenly they're becoming incredibly fluid. The dialogue between the Forge and the Frost has finally reached this violent, undeniable breaking point.
Now, the text breaks all of this down into 4 parables. Let's start with Parable I, the agitation of the crucible.
In this opening sequence, we're introduced to a city described, rather beautifully I might add, as mirrors in the mud. And this city begins to absolutely churn as 2 massive metaphysical forces lock into combat. You've got the fire and the frost dichotomy. On one side, the red specter roars out, "Melt down the dull lead of history, embrace the spirit of becoming." But then, on the exact opposite side, the monument of stagnation coldly replies, "No, true perfection requires absolute stillness. Succumb to the frost." So the fire and the frost are no longer just these distant, abstract poles. They're violently clashing right on top of each other.
And the results of that clash? Absolute chaos. The blistering energy of the Forge literally bleeds into the frozen, rigid architecture. It's like the dust of the old world gets swept up into this shimmering alchemical storm. And because of all this high-energy agitation, the messy mischief of ancient blueprints is suddenly unleashed, flowing through the city's alleys like molten silver.
Which brings us to Parable II, the birth of the plasma synthesis. As the energy in the city rises, we witness the intense friction of what the text calls Apollonian gaskets. They're snapping against this immense heat of transformation. And from that exact friction, a brand new entity crystallizes, the plasma being. Think of it as a creature of pure plasma, a totally paradoxical synthesis. It takes the wildfire of imagination from the red specter and perfectly combines it with the cold, clinical detachment of the monument. It absolutely refuses the dead stillness of the frost, but it also rejects the structured agony of the Forge. Instead, it embodies pure, chaotic potential.
Now, this plasma being has zero interest in building things or binding rules. It honestly just wants to cause mischief. It shatters the mirrors of the hollow souls, breaking apart these gilded cages that people have built for themselves, and it entirely disrupts the illusion of a perfected universe. It's a real game changer for the setting.
Moving on to the existential study, Mechanics of Decay for the literature student.
So, what does this all actually mean for you, the literature student studying this text? Well, as a student of existential decay, this is the absolutely critical question you have to ask yourself. How do we study our own erasure when the static becomes a fluid hunt? It's a brilliant question, really, because it frames the impending horrifying metamorphosis of the fable's main antagonist. We're shifting away from theoretical philosophy and moving right into active, hunting terror.
To unpack that question, we need to break down the core themes of terminal decay. First, you're witnessing the shift from a static monument to a fluid shadow. You're watching the literal erasure of the self. You also have to confront the deep, hollow fear that hides behind any facade of perfect order. And finally, you really have to understand the dynamic struggle of the spirit of becoming. These aren't just abstract ideas in a textbook. They are the literal mechanics of the trap closing around the characters in this grim fable.
All of which sets the stage for Parable III, Transmutation of the Predatory Ink.
As the spark of that chaotic plasma being ignites, a character known as the ghastly ghoul of Revelation undergoes a deeply, deeply horrifying metamorphosis. He is no longer content to just sit there as a ghostly static monument trapping travelers who happen to stumble into him. Instead, he reaches directly into the frozen architecture and actually absorbs the very contracts written in disappearing ink that he used to use to ensnare people.
By absorbing those contracts, he dissolves entirely into the spirit wraith of living ink. So now, he's this fluid, predatory shadow. But the truly terrifying part? He carries the heavy weight of sovereign laws within his actual liquid substance. He becomes a constant, moving reminder of the hollow fear that actively pursues anyone trying to escape their terminal prisons.
This brilliantly illustrates his totally new methodology. He's no longer waiting around for a signed contract to trap a soul. First, he drifts through the city as a liquid void, with the sole goal of silencing the world forever. Then, acting as a moving stain of terminal decay, he directly inscribes the erasure of the self right onto the souls of the weary. And finally, he dynamically suppresses the spirit of becoming. He's evolved from a trap into an active, relentless struggle against non-existence.
Which leads us to our final act, Parable IV, the predatory shadow speaks.
We've finally arrived at the last hour of the great evening. The broken bridge has been crossed. The landscape is irrevocably changed. And to truly understand this final parable, the literature student needs to hear it not from an outside observer, but straight from the mouth of the terror itself. So, listen closely as the predatory shadow speaks. I am the liquid void. I am the moving stain of terminal decay. I am the sovereign law dissolved into fluid pursuit. I seek to silence the world forever, and I am looking at you.
Understand my new reality, student. I do not wait for your signature. I no longer need your permission to trap you in the frost. I rewrite the erasure of the self directly onto the souls of the weary. I am the creeping, deep, hollow fear that hunts you when you try to escape the hollow perfection of your gilded cages.
Welcome to the final struggle. You're no longer caught between a distant forge and some static statue. You are caught in a dynamic war. On one side is me, a shroud of ink that has literally learned to hunt, and on the other side is that plasma being, a chaotic flash of mischief. It dances through the twisted roots of this ruined city, taunting me, saying you can't catch a spark, but it simply doesn't understand the depth of the dark. I watch that plasma synthesis. I watch it mocking the pious cows of contentment who have happily accepted the utter silence of their cages. It disrupts, it shatters, it creates all this messy mischief. But I erase.
The illusions of the past are entirely burned away now. The static has become fluid. This is your ultimate existential test. The destiny of the self absolutely must be defended. The spirit of becoming can no longer just rest. It has to constantly fight against an enemy that adapts, that flows, that relentlessly pursues.
So, student of literature, analyzing these mechanics of decay so safely from behind your screen, I leave you trapped in the contemplation of your own gilded cage with this final thought. When the high-energy flux reaches your door, will your destiny be burned in the crucible of becoming, or will you let my living ink write your erasure in the dark?